Good day, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Today's topic is quite important. It is around debunking common myths of bipolar disorder. Joining us today is a very special guest, which is Dr. Franz Korb, who is a psychiatrist, a specialized psychiatrist based in Johannesburg with a special interest in adult mood and anxiety disorders, as well as adult ADHD. He is in full-time private practice in Stanton and also consults for Life Healthcare in Ganyisa. Dr. Korb has been involved with the South African Depression and Anxiety Group since its inception in 1994, serving on the board and previously as board chairman. He has lectured in psychopharmacology at the University of Johannesburg since 2007 and regularly contributes to the mental health discussions through publications, media interviews, and professional forums. Dr. Korb, Dr. Cole, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. And it's always so nice. I mean, like you said, I've been working with SADC sure, since it started back 31, 32 years ago, almost, I suppose we're going now. And it's always such a pleasure to do this because I think it's just so important, these kind of ask questions programs to educate the public. Um, so that is really, it's a pleasure for me to be here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fons. We truly do appreciate it. So I think to start us off with the discussions, bipolar disorder is often misunderstood. What are some of the most common myths that you hear about disorder around bipolar?
Yeah, I think, two things really. I think the first thing is that the term bipolar disorder has become so common. I mean, everybody has been using bipolar disorder for anything, for any problem, any mood swing, any upset, whatever. They use the term, maybe I'm bipolar. So I think the first thing we need to clear up that bipolar disorder or true bipolar disorder, according to the medical textbooks, the medical literature, is a medical psychiatric disorder. And somehow we must stick to that kind of uh, classification, definition of bipolar disorder. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think, and that goes with all psychiatric disorders, is that there's such a, the media portrays, psychiatric disorders, bipolar disorder, depression, suicide, so in such kind of stereotypical kind of wrong ways that I think the public often has got a wrong perception of mental health and mental disorders. And of course, that also contributes to the stigma why people don't come forward and ask for help. So I think those two aspects that we need to revisit exactly what is bipolar disorder. And secondly, we need to get away from the kind of media stereotypes and stigma that is out there. So that is important, really important for me to go home.
Sure. And I'm really glad that we're having these conversations, Dr. Fons, because it really helps to break the stigma. And I want to get into this particular myth. Some people think that bipolar disorder simply means someone is moody or they dramatic. Why is this particular misunderstanding quite harmful?
Yeah, yeah. Again, like I said, started off by just briefly mentioning, that people use the term bipolar for any kind of mood swing or upset or whatever. But if you really look at the proper, and I'm not going to go in all the hundreds of criteria, but in essence, what bipolar is, and that is what bipolar means in Latin, it means two poles. And what that is, people with bipolar disorder experience extreme mood swings out of the ordinary, very intense highs, which we call mania, or if it's not so very high, hypomania. That's the extreme high. And then the other part of the pole is the depressive part. So these people have these extreme, absolutely out of the normal, extreme emotions. That's the first part. And the second part, it's cyclical. So you have a manic episode and a depressive episode, a manic episode, a depressive episode. So it is a cyclical disorder that vacillates between the two poles, bipolar, up and down, up and down. It's not something that, that some people think you wake up in the morning and you feel good because you've had a good night's sleep. and then something bad happens at work at 10 o'clock, and then you're upset and you're not happy, and then you're down.
Mm,
That's not happy and down. That is not bipolar.
mm, mm,
That is a normal daily emotional fluctuation according to circumstances. So again, just that, Kim, it's intense, extreme emotions that last a long time, and it's cyclical. And
mm.
that in essay is Lebohong what bipolar is.
Mm. And thank you so much for that definition. Sometimes it's quite helpful for us to distinguish what is the difference between a bipolar disorder and someone's day-to-day life. And I love the
Yeah,
example that you used, right? To say in the morning you wake up, you might be feeling good, and then something disrupts your day with work-related, and then you get upset. But that does not
yeah.
mean that's bipolar,
That's not bipolar. That's
Yeah.
normal. Life happens, and we need to cope. People need to cope with when life happens to us. Nobody in life goes through life just sailing through with absolutely nothing and no problems happening to them. But we need to cope with those days. But if it's bipolar, it's a true cyclical disease.
Mm. That gives
Yeah,
a lot of clarity, especially for our viewers today. And I'm really grateful, like I said, that we're
yeah,
having this conversation around debunking those common, myths. Another myth is that people with bipolar disorder cannot lead successful or fulfilling lives. What does the reality actually look like?
yeah. And that I'm now talking about bipolar today, but I'm actually talking about all mental illness, really. If we were back in the 1950s, and the first psychiatric medicines only came out in the 1950s, 1960s. So it's not that long ago. But that myth is such a big myth that people with mental illness cannot live, or with bipolar cannot live normal lives. Of course, they can live normal lives. We've got now all these medications, and there is lots of advances over the years in medications, new medications, treatment regimes, all kinds of things that we've developed over the years for medication for bipolar disorder that really can control bipolar disorder very, very well. So that means really, in essence, that people with bipolar, if they properly treated, they can live absolutely, absolutely normal lives and function totally normally in public. And now I'm talking about medication, but please, we mustn't forget that medication is not the only treatment for mental illness and bipolar. Hey? Often bipolar and other mental illnesses cause havoc with people's circumstances, with their relationships, with their families. So we must involve psychologists as well, for instance.
Mm,
Psychologists can help to, for instance, teach bipolar patients the warning signs when they're not getting well, when they're going into a depression, when they're going into a manic phase. Recognize the kind of warning signs and then treat the warning signs to prevent a breakdown. Help people to function properly. See an occupational therapist that'll help with work-life bipolar integration into the workplace. So there are lots of treatment modalities that we've got these days to help people to function fully in society and in a job situation. So that myth, I really want us to get out of the way, that people that suffer from a mental illness or bipolar disorder cannot function or cannot go back to work. Of course, people can function well again. So that to
mm.
me absolutely is Lebohong is just so important that we talk about that.
And I love that you mentioned medication, Dr. Franz Korb, that it's not the only treatment plan that one could sort of venture into. Many
Yeah.
people believe that medication for bipolar disorder changes a person's personality. How true is that?
Yeah, just say that again. I didn't catch that last one. How true
Okay,
is?
that's not a problem. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to find out from you. Many people believe that medication for bipolar disorder changes a person's
Oh, it's a
personality.
personality. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no,
And
no,
how
no,
true is that? Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, definitely not. I mean, because we know personality is a difficult topic, and that is a long topic. What is a person's personality? But the personality is your character, your nature. Where when we talk about bipolar disorder, that's a chemical disease, that's a biological disease where chemistry goes wrong in your brain. So it doesn't change your personality. And I think that is something that I see in practice a lot. And what people do is when people become, not only with psychiatric illness, with medical illnesses as well, if you've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, you forget who you are and you become
Mm,
bipolar disorder. You live your disorder. You mustn't live your disorder. You must live with your disorder.
mm,
You know that the disorder mustn't overwhelm you, and with whatever you do, you think I'm bipolar. I can't do that. So it doesn't affect your personality. It doesn't affect your IQ, any of those kind of things.
mm,
Personality is your nature, your character. Okay, obviously, when you do have and I think that's often where the confusion comes in.
mm,
When you do become depressed from bipolar, or you go into a manic phase, obviously you do crazy, impulsive, stupid things. But that is the disorder that's doing that. That is not your nature or your personality. Once
mm,
the disorder is, or your mania or your depression is controlled again with medication, then you're back to your normal personality, your normal self. So it
mm,
doesn't really affect your personality.
mm.
Yeah, yeah,
I love how you explained it there, that one shouldn't sort of identify with the disorder that they're currently experiencing.
yeah,
A lot
yeah.
of people tend to wear that hat quite a lot, to say, but I can't do this because I have bipolar disorder. And I love
Yeah.
how you explained it to say, we shouldn't attach, a mental health condition to our identity or to our personality.
And I see that was physical. I'm a doctor, so I see that was physical conditions again as well. Hey, I've had a heart attack last year, so that means I can never ever do exercise again, or I can't do this, or I can't do that because of this, or I've got diabetes. I can't do this. I can't do that. So people mustn't live there. Your disorder mustn't become you. You still remain who you are, and you need to live with your illness, whatever it is.
Sure. Now, Dr. Franz Korb, is bipolar disorder caused by a personal weakness or poor coping skills, as some people believe?
No, exactly what we've just also now just been talking about. It's not because of a character flaw like people tend to, or a weakness like the public often used to say, or you can't cope or any of those kind of things. No, it's not that. We know that most of our mental illnesses now, or virtually all of them now, with the intensive research the past 20, 30, 40 years, we know the biology behind it, the kind of chemistry behind it, what goes wrong in the brain to cause this illness. So it's not just a weakness that you just pull yourself out of it or get
Mm,
yourself organized or whatever you want to call it, or stop doing it, or, just talk yourself out of your depression. You can't do that. All these disorders are chemical disorders that we need to really. Okay, and I think the other thing perhaps at this stage we also need to stress is that often the cause of a breakdown of a bipolar mania or a bipolar depression are life stressors. So
mm,
people need, and that's where psychologists again come in, help you to cope when stress happens in your life, how to cope with that stress rather than let that stress, whatever happens in your life, if it's financial, relationship, marital, whatever it is, that doesn't push you into a breakdown. So people
mm,
need to learn to cope with life stress in general and not with a
mm.
disease, with life stress to prevent further breakdowns. So that
And I
is
think
also
with a
important.
follow-up, and I think
Yeah,
with a follow-up on that, Dr. Franz Korb, what would be some of those coping skills or mechanisms that you would sort of suggest to some of our viewers today who may be, struggling with bipolar disorder? What are some of those tips that you could share with them as a way to cope?
yeah, that's difficult just to talk about it now because I mean it depends from person to person, and
Mm,
it also depends uh, on the situation. If you had a manic breakdown and you're married and you did stupid, crazy, impulsive things, which is part of mania, and that causes your marriage to break down, then see a psychologist to help you to sort out your marital difficulties.
mm,
Coping skills is not something that you just learn from a psychologist. They teach you how to deal with situations. That is, in essence, what
mm,
coping skills is all about, is how to deal with situations and not just sit back and say, my problem takes over. My problem just destroy me. And that mustn't happen. It tells you how to take action for whatever is happening, if it's financial, if you've been retrenched, if it's whatever, and how to cope with that. So that is part of coping skills, is taking action to approach the problem and sort it out.
Hmm. Being intentional sounds like it's the key word for me, from what you just
Yeah,
said. Being intentional about implementing those coping mechanisms. And I love how
yeah,
you said that it's different for each person. What might work
it
for
is.
Dr. Frank Korb might not necessarily work for Liver Hunt and vice versa.
And
So I
and
love
your
what you
and,
said.
yeah, and your circumstances are different than my circumstances.
Yeah.
Everybody's circumstances is different. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah. So no, that's very interesting, Dr. Franz.
yeah.
Some people think that once someone feels better, they can stop taking their
No.
medication. Why can this be risky?
Oh, that is. Thank God you're mentioning that, because that is one of the worst things in bipolar disorder or any psychiatric illness. I don't think, and I think that is a kind of a basic rule in psychiatric illness, or at this stage, mental illness. We haven't really got to the point yet where we've medications that can heal or get, heal your bipolar disorder. Unfortunately, the serious things like bipolar, major depression, schizophrenia, all the serious mental illnesses is kind of there for life. And I think that is one we need to absolutely recognize. And I think that is one of the biggest problems we've got for relapses, is that people think they're better. They've been well for 6 months or a year. Why do I still need this medication? And then they stop their medication, and lo and behold, soon they've got another breakdown. So really, I think adherence to treatment plans is the most important message we must get out there. To take your medication regularly, and to make sure that you're on your medication to prevent anything. And I mean, it's also not a question of, I'm on this medication, I must stay on the same thing forever. Unfortunately, circumstances change, people change, we get older, our brains get older, stress gets more, stress gets less, whatever. So we need to adjust medication from time to time as well. So it's not what you start off 3 years ago will remain the same. So the message is, stay on medication and see your doctor from time to time, or if you feel things are not going well, to make sure that you adjust your medication or change medication. So,
Yeah.
and at least now these days, like I said in the beginning, we've now got lots of medications that we can use or switch to.
Mhm. Sure. Thank you so much for clarifying that for us, Dr. Franz, because there is a lot of stigma around taking medication. Sometimes people will say that I've been taking this medication for 6 months. However, I'm not seeing any changes. I'm going to stop immediately
No,
and
the,
continue. Mm.
absolutely. That is also important. If people, I tell my patients to make notes. When they come to me, I want to see notes. They must tell me what is happening, what has got, if they've had side effects, if it's not working, when it's not working, what symptoms they've got. They must make notes, because you need to, if it's not working, you're not on the right medication or the right doses. So people mustn't just leave it if and I mean, unfortunately, in psychiatry, there is no magic formula that we know that this medication will definitely work for this person at this dose. So it is literally, we need to keep on tweaking and adjusting medication until the person feels 100% or near
That is such
100%.
a beautiful tip, Dr. Franz. I've actually never thought about it to that extent, to say to patients who may be struggling with bipolar disorder, who are taking medication, constantly track how your day looks like. When you are taking the medication, how often are you taking it? What is it that you're noticing as you're taking it? So that if there are
Yeah,
any challenges, they can actually bring
that's
those
right.
notes to their
Yeah,
psychiatrist.
yeah,
That is such an interesting
yeah,
tip.
yeah, yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay, no, I love that. So there is also a belief that, bipolar disorder is rare, that not a lot of people have bipolar disorder. How common is it actually that people do have bipolar disorder out there?
Yeah, yeah. It's common, but also not that common. If you look at
Mhm.
the worldwide kind of epidemiological surveys and studies, it's anything between 2 and 3% of the population. So that means, some countries it will be two, one will be 1.8%. American data says 2.3%. So we put it at anything between 2 and 3%. So that means in essence, out of every 100 people, there will be 2 or 3 people that should have bipolar disorder. So it's not that common, but it's also not uncommon.
Mhm.
And I think, we did a survey a while ago at one of the big medical aids to look at the percentage of bipolars because they kept on saying everybody's got bipolar disorder.
Sure.
And we looked at their statistics, and the statistics was about 2% of the patients that came on for psychiatry was 2% bipolar. So it sticks to the normal worldwide kind of,
Mhm.
statistics. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
It's interesting what studies can actually do to sort of break the stigma, around different mental health conditions or disorders. And I love
yeah,
that, that's something that's been implemented to actually show that not everyone has bipolar disorder.
yeah, yeah,
And it shows that, people tend to say that they have bipolar disorder, but in actual fact, this is just part of
I
their
have it.
daily life where they wake up feeling
Yeah.
happy and then something happens that just disrupts their mood
It's
once a
it's the
day.
media. It's you young people in the media.
It is definitely the media, of which it's something that we should also look into to actually see what impact does social media have on one's mental
Yeah,
health.
yeah,
That's actually an interesting one.
yeah,
I think we've
yeah.
spoken quite a lot, Dr. Fans, around the myths, that we have to sort of debunk. How does stigma and misinformation affect people living with bipolar disorder?
I mean that still goes with all mental health, and I mean that is one of the biggest purposes of SADC is to really try and break down to debunk all those myths of mental illness, to get the reality out there, to psychoeducate the public on exactly what mental illness is and what it's all about. Because, like I said right in the beginning as well, the stigma is still there for all mental illness. People to come forward, whether it is for bipolar disorder, whether it's men with depression we run programs on, whether it's suicide that SADC tackles the myths about suicide and all of that. So the myth about all the illnesses and what it's all about, and the kind of, again, I want to say the stereotypes that if you've got bipolar disorder, you've got a character flaw, you've got a weak personality, that kind of thing. That myth is still unbelievably so prevalent out there. And that is what we need to get it to debunk, to really educate the public. And that is what this program is all about,
Mm.
so that we can do that we can educate the public in what these things are really all about. And it is a medical illness like any other thing. And if you do feel you've got something, go and speak to your doctor, go and speak to the psychologist, go and speak to the psychiatrist, and speak to the people that can make a proper diagnosis and put you on proper treatment.
Mm.
So, unfortunately, in mental illness, the stigma will still be there. And I still think we've still got a big job ahead of us to continue getting the truth out there.
That's so true, Dr. Franz. There's so much stigma around mental health in general, in society, where some people still believe that it's not a thing. Some people still think that those that are going through mental health challenges, they're selfish or they're seeking attention. And that's not true, and I'm grateful that we're having such conversations for the public to actually realize that it's important that we debunk those myths so that we can
Yeah,
be in a better place to actually support people who may be going through challenges like bipolar disorder. So,
yeah.
so Dr. Franz Korb, if there is one key message you would like people to remember about bipolar disorder, what would it be?
I think the main thing that I want to say is please, if there's any suspicion that you do have, or any sign that you've got, or any worry that you might have bipolar disorder, don't just listen to the media or do any of those kind of things. Please come forward and see a professional person to do a proper full assessment. And if you do have bipolar disorder, please go for the correct treatment. I think that is the biggest message I want to get out there is to don't try and Google it and use Dr. Google, and because then you can find anything on Dr. Google and you can make any diagnosis on Dr. Google. Please go and see a professional that can do the diagnosis properly, And once a diagnosis is done, please follow that treatment. So I think that is my biggest message.
Ah, thank you so much, Dr. Franz Korb, for sharing those words of wisdom, to those that are viewing this today. And to those that are viewing, if you are going through a hard time, if you are struggling, please do reach out to SADAG. We are available 24/7. Let us have a conversation. Let us debunk those common myths out there together, because together we can make mental health matter. And if you're going through a hard time, you're not alone. Help is always available. Dr. Franz Korb, thank you so much for your time today. We truly do appreciate it. And to all of our viewers, we will see you very soon for a next discussion. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Keep well. Bye.